This is our Tach-It model CTL, and I'm going to go through some of the basic setups in this video. Our Tach-It model CTL will come to you fully assembled except for the arm holding the roll of labels, which is easily attached by placing it on the outside of the main frame here and using these 3 Allen screws which are provided. A set of Allen wrenches will be included along with some other parts when you purchase the machine, so you will not need any tools required once it's uncrated. The only other connections required are these two, which have a unique pin configuration and for some of the internal components within the machine, as well as the main power cord. This plugs into a standard 110 volt outlet. Walking over to the front of the machine, we have a couple parts I'll just bring out. This is our label roll arm. This is where the label roll will sit. And this is our touchscreen controller. And this is where all the settings for the computer and the PLC are created within the machine. So the basic setup starts with putting the label roll onto the machine. Now you have 2 flanges. You have an inner flange, which has a collar and a set screw to permanently mount it to this shaft. It can be moved left and right as needed, but once set, we do normally recommend leaving it here. If you do need to move the label laterally across the product that you're labeling, you can just simply loosen this, move the head left and right, and then just tighten it up when you found the proper position. The outer roll guide comes off easily using this spring clamp, which we just pressed together, and comes on in and out. And there is a 3-inch core insert, so you just put your label roll on the inside, on the outside, tighten that up, and you don't want to put a lot of extra tension here, just enough so that the roll cannot move laterally. When loading the labels, we want to come off the underside of the label, around this shaft, and then up to this brake arm shaft. This brake arm is spring-loaded and allows the label roll to spin as needed, yet stops any overrun of the labels. One secret to this machine is if your label here is not touching this shaft, it means that your roll is not on correctly, and you want to make sure that you reset it. One of the things you'll notice also as we go through this setup video is each of these shafts has a black spring collar. Those move in and out without any tools required, but they're designed to keep the label traveling straight along its path. And once your label is set and tracking straight, you want to bring these in just to the width of the liner, and that'll keep the label perfectly straight. Continuing with the feeding, we come from this roller, we come down to this roller, and there's another shaft here. The label goes in between, and you have a Teflon, or a urethane, excuse me, piece right here, which is designed to give the label a little bit of tension, as we don't want any slack. We want to keep the label with a little bit of tension throughout the whole feeding process to avoid any avoid an inconsistency in the label feed. We then come to our stop sensor. Now the stop sensor is the sensor that reads the gap in between the labels, so only one label is fed each time. Couple things about the stop sensor is that there is an indicator mark right here, which is a black arrow. You can see it at the end of this label. That is the actual detection point within the sensor of where the label needs to be. And you want to make sure that that's in the label. If you're using a round label, you want to make sure that it's in the middle as much as possible. You can adjust this sensor up and down utilizing this thumb screw and laterally with this thumb screw. If you're using a clear label, then you do need a special sensor, which we do have available as an option. We then continue the label feeding, and I'm going to lift the label head up easily by just releasing the clamp down behind this roller and around our separator plate. Now we're going to go up over this roller, and then we go around the purple roller, and then between the purple roller and this gray roller. Now there's a locking mechanism here, which we want to open to allow space for that label to be fed through. But it's very important that once the label is fed through and you're ready to cycle the machine, that you close this. That removes the space and makes sure these two are meshing together properly. Then the label liner will come up around the rewind bar here and secured by our U-pin. So that's the basic loading of the machine. And we have a diagram located right here where your operators can see it. A few other aspects of the machine before we go into some other specifics. This is the start sensor of the machine. This is a red proximity sensor, and this reads the product as it's going through the roller system of the machine, and this detects the product and helps with the proper timing of the label onto the machine. We also have a collating system in the back of the unit. Now the collator will feed one bag or one product in each time. And you have a hopper where you can put in, based on the height of your product, multiple items. These arms move in and out by loosening these thumb screws, and you want to put that to the width of your item, just so keep it from skewing. We have a ramp here which brings the end up, making the feeding a little easier. And you have three drive belts here. You have a drive belt and two drive wheels, that will drive the product through. Right here is a thickness adjustment based upon the thickness of the product that you're using, so that we only want one to feed through each time. And because of that start sensor, we do need to have a gap in between each of the products as they feed through. Otherwise, the labeling may not be consistent. So I'm going to take my bags here, which I'm going to demonstrate, take the leading one, the bottom one out, and put a leading edge and just put it right into there. And now the bags are in the proper feeding position. I have already adjusted this for my product, but again, you would just, it's a little bit of trial and error, loosen or tighten this based on thickness, and then you have a secondary nut here which will lock in that adjustment. Now we're going to lower our label head strictly by pushing down and utilizing the latch to lock it into place. With the stop sensor, it is calibrated for most types of opaque or paper-based labels. So when you want to start and how to set this sensor up is you want to take the label and bring it through the sensor. Now when the sensor is at the gap, you should see that yellow light. And that means that the sensor is reading the gap between the labels, and only one label should feed out. But through the body of the label, you do not want that yellow light to be seen. The sensor adjustments are pretty simple. If you need to increase the sensitivity so that, let's say as an example, it's not reading this yellow light, you press the plus button. If the sensor is reading anything within the label itself, then you press the minus button. Very strongly suggest you press it once or twice, not multiple times. You try it again. Then if you need to press it again, you do it again. It is strongly suggested not to press it 10, 15 times. That could throw it off completely and require a service call. Okay. The front control panel is very simple. We have our main power on off. We have our conveyor panel on off, which is the conveyor that feeds the product through the machine. And we have our conveyor speed adjustment. Now we're going to talk about the touchscreen control panel. This is our home screen. So right up on the top, we have our total count of the units that have been run through the machine, and this is resettable by hitting this clear here. or the C. So we're now back at 0. We have a target counter. The target counter can be set for any quantity of product to be labeled, and the target counter can be turned on and off. Currently, we have that target counter set at 1,000. So when this number here reaches 1,000, the machine will stop labeling, and the screen will turn red, indicating that you've reached that the number required. It is very important that if you use the target counter, when you start your target, you zero out the number of counts so that you get the full quantity required. Moving over to the right, we have our three main functions of the machine. We have our label head, which can be turned on and off, and our conveyor, which can be turned on and off. These are now on, indicated by the black filling in of the boxes. The target counter is not filled in, it means it's off. To turn these systems on and off, we just hit Option, and we can turn functions on and off. And then when you go back, if I turn the target counter on, you'll notice that that's now filled in. Let me turn that off. You'll also notice that you do have a start error and a stop error. These are really only suggested if you are going to be using this machine for full inline automated use. Otherwise, we suggest they're kept off. Another aspect of this touchscreen controller is our inputs and outputs. So right now, the stop sensor is showing that it's right on the gap. If I move this label down, you can see that it goes in and out. And that's a good indication of the different sequences within the machine and ways to test the start sensor, stop sensor, the stepper motor, and the conveyor to know that they are functioning properly and the proper inputs and outputs are being given to the PLC within this machine. We have our run button right here, which turns the cycle from standby onto the actual run. And under File, we have 5 memory presets. Now each one of these 3 presets has 3 settings. The first setting is label speed. It's important that the label speed coordinates directly with the conveyor speed adjusted by this dial. And if these are not coordinated correctly together, what will happen is you'll lose consistency in the label placement. And that'll happen if the conveyor is running faster than your label speed. And the label will drag along the product. If the label head speed is faster than the conveyor speed, you'll get crinkles in the label or bumps or bubbles. So then you either need to reduce the speed of the label head or increase the speed of the conveyor. The second setting, and I'm going to change this briefly to show you how to make a change here, is the start delay. The start delay is the distance from when the product passes over that start sensor we showed earlier to when we actually apply the label. Now, to adjust this, all I do is I click on the box and I enter my new variable. So right now my count is at 450. I want to go to 600. I go 600, enter. Anytime you make a change here, it's very important you hit save and OK. Now that change has been saved. Going back into file number 2 where I have this, I can change this back, let's say, to 500 by going 500, enter. It's there now, save, OK. There will be a little trial and error when you first get the machine for each product to set up these memory presets. But once it's set, you have it there for your individual products. The last adjustment here is the stop delay. As I mentioned earlier, you can adjust for the label positioning, and I'll show you where the proper positioning is to be on this. So when you feed the label, and I'm going to raise the label head here, and we're going to come around here, you want the label to extend about 1 millimeter beyond this plate, which we call our peel plate. Now, to make your gross adjustments, we can lift and move the sensor up and down. So the way we suggest doing this is you feed your labels as shown previously, and you position it so that that label is about 1 millimeter past. Then you move the sensor up and down until the yellow light on the sensor is illuminated. This way you know you're in the proper position. Now, what the stop delay in the computer is a fine-tuning adjustment. So if my label now, when I start running the machine, is feeding out too much, I can reduce that variable. Or if it's feeding out not enough, I can change that variable the same way we've shown. Going back to the main screen, the last thing is our run and stop. So when you're seeing run here, that means that the machine is in its standby mode. So for me to put the machine into run so it starts labeling, I'm going to hit run here. You'll now see stop. We're now into the active mode. And all I'm going to do is hit my conveyor. And the products will run through.